I did something which has kind of become my hallmark, which is I stuck my nose in somewhere where I was not yet invited. And it was amazing. It was, we cracked this technology and it just worked brilliantly. The best success we had, the most money we made actually, because we were very early in retrospect, was when Apple sent us a cease and desist letter.
From Ministry of Work, welcome to Greater Manchester's Greatest Minds, the show about Greater Manchester's pioneers, entrepreneurs and visionaries, and the stories that brought their ideas to life. I'm Eddie Whittingham, and on today's show, we speak with David Levine, a serial founder, investor and the driving force behind Manchester Angels. David's journey starts in Dublin, where a cheeky comment in a science class led to national awards and the spark of a tech career. Since then, he's helped scale global ventures, launched his own startup from a family kitchen table, and raised millions for founders across the UK and beyond. David's a key player in Manchester's startup ecosystem, building a community of angel investors committed to more than just capital.
So I grew up in Dublin, in Ireland, which is quite amazing because most people think I'm from Bristol. I have been here in the UK for 30 years now. It is easily 30 years. So longer than I lived at home. I left when I was 18 to come to uni. But people think I'm from Bristol. Even people from Bristol, which in itself is quite odd. So I grew up in Dublin. I'm clearly Orthodox Jewish. I was less religious, less Orthodox growing up. But I grew up in that very small Jewish community of Ireland at its peak. Decades ago, there were only about 2,500, 3,000 Jews in all of Ireland. And when I grew up, there was 1,500, maybe.
Wow.
And you could track the progress. I'm the youngest of three kids. My older brother, who is 6 years older than me, he would have had, in the only Jewish school in Ireland, of which only about a third were Jewish, he had, let's say, 12 or 13 other Jewish members of the community in his class. And my sister had 9 to 10 and I had 7 or 8, so you kind of track that, and that progress has continued today, although slightly the opposite way, because you have a very large number of Israelis who've come to Ireland because Ireland is kind of the European tech headquarters for a number of tech businesses. So so it's an interesting place to grow up, particularly kind of that identity, both being Irish and being Jewish. No anti-Semitic problems growing up. Now it's a horrendous place for Jewish people to be. It's a very highly anti-Semitic country, driven by a lot of anti-Israel feeling, which turns into pure anti-Semitism, unfortunately. So it's not a place I would want to spend any more time in, if I'm honest with you. It's not a place I'm particularly proud of being from as a direct result. But my childhood was great growing up, certainly. It was frustrating at times. My dad was a dentist, and every other children of dentists that I knew had a great life because their dads were doing, private dental work, and my dad didn't. Right, my dad did.
Cheers, Dad.
Yeah, literally, cheers, Dad. Right, my dad did the equivalent of the NHS in Dublin, in Ireland.
Why out of interest? Was that some sort of moral?
It was a mixture of the moral pull, but also just where he happened to find his entrance into following dental school. The person he ended up working with and kind of acquiring a practice from was in a very, very poor area of central Dublin, in the in around the Liffey River, in the very centre of Dublin city centre, a very, very poor part of the city itself. So that's where he found his practice. And we used to be worried as kids because we grew up during the AIDS crisis, or when AIDS really came into the AIDS and HIV really came into the public view. And my dad is the old school, and he would never use gloves. And his clientele, his patients, his cohort of patients, very much came from the addict population, the addict community, in a very big way, because it was super, super poor. And we were afraid as kids. We'd say, "Dad, please wear gloves. You have to wear gloves because these were active addicts to a large extent." But it's very different, the healthcare system in Ireland, whereas here in the UK, the vast majority of people are on the NHS, get seen by the NHS, and you use private healthcare to streamline and accelerate your health provision. In Ireland, the very, very kind of deprived of society tend to have national healthcare coverage, because most people have, I can't remember if it's mandatory, but certainly the vast majority of people have a kind of public-private semi-healthcare insurance program. But my dad was never doing that, right? My dad just always did. His patient, even today, you meet people and they hear the surname and they go, "Oh, have you any relation to the dentist?" Yeah, it was my father, and they speak very highly of my father as a dentist, as a caregiver. They also talk very highly of his jokes, which is just shocking to us because they're just horrendous. We used to joke that he would never use anaesthetic because he'd just tell these jokes, which he's still telling to this day, and they're as horrendous now as they were then. But as long as he's healthy and well. So that was my confirmation. And I did, as I was getting to kind of 11, 12, 13, I came to my bar mitzvah, which is a very formative part of it, of no matter where you are in the religious spectrum, and we were always very traditional as a kind of a Jewish community, as a family, the bar mitzvah is a very important part of your life, very formative. And you get a lot of money for your bar mitzvah. People give you, you invite a whole bunch of people to the celebrations, and people give you, money as a present. And in my day, you spent a chunk on something. For some people, it was a big bike.
Yeah.
For me, I bought a 386 PC, 386DX PC, I think it was, from Amstrad, so Alan Sugar's old business. And I got an incredible deal. I remember at the time a very close family friend who was into computers back then. So this was 1990 in around, gosh, there's my age. And he said, you could buy this. And it was only $1,500. I think my entire bank savings was about $1,800. This was $1,500. So, back then, that was a lot of money, right? A lot of money. Yeah. And so we bought it, and it came and it didn't work. And I don't know if you've ever order something off Amazon and you're really looking forward to this gadget, this cool tool, and you come out and it doesn't turn up, or it turns up and it doesn't work. You're a bit heartbroken, right? Especially can you imagine when you were 13? Yeah. So I'd waited 3 weeks to get it. It hadn't worked. So anyway, sent it off for repair. Came out all fine. This was the days when before you switched off your machine at night, you first of all, you used MS-DOS, right? And then there was Windows 3.0, but you closed down Windows. So you switch it on and you type Win to start Windows into the keyboard, and you close the Windows down, and then you typed park. You have to park your hard drive because they were so susceptible to vibrations that you actually had to physically type in this command, which kind of buffered the hard drive through some hardware, and it was just quite an amazing time compared to it is today. So I really started getting into computing then. I certainly would not say I was a hacker or any of that, but I started learning some very basic coding techniques using what were called BBSs, bulletin boards. Remember the bulletin boards, right? It cost my parents a fortune because you dialed up with your modem, whatever the sound was. And I had I was insanely quick. I had a 14.4 kbps modem, right? I mean, I was on steroids. And I was, dialing up, and in those days, if your phone cost a number, and you'd shout at your mum to get off the phone, and she'd go, "Oh, sorry, I picked up the phone." That's that you've lost everything. It's just, kids these days have absolutely no way to relate. So that was me. And I was downloading code, and I was creating code. I entered
What sort of stuff were you doing? Like, what sort of stuff were you coding?
Well, here's a really boring thing. You asked me at the very beginning to talk about a serendipitous moment. Let me tell you about a formative serendipitous moment. As my kids would probably tell you, I wasn't the best student in school. And I remember once, I can remember it to this day. I was asked nicely, told to sit at the front of the class because I just had done something stupid. I don't know, threw a grape at. I can't remember what it was. Anyway, and then the teacher, the science teacher, was having a conversation with a girl in my class next to her. Right, so my teacher was sat at the front, and the girl was sat next to her, and they were talking about something. And I did something which is kind of become my hallmark, which is I stuck my nose in somewhere where I was not yet invited. And they're talking about something called the Young Scientist Exhibition, which back in those days, it was a kind of a big thing. Our school had never had anybody enter a Young Scientist Exhibition. And they were talking about what was then, and even now, I think quite a boring subject, especially for a 15, 16-year-old school kid, river pollution. And so it was a chemistry class or a science class. And the teacher was kind of encouraging this girl to enter the Young Science exhibition with a study of river pollution. And I said, well, why don't I build a database for that? Right? I was not supposed to be there because I'd been a prat and chucked a grape. Barry Newman, sorry if you're listening, but I hope your eye is better. I think I threw a grape at Barry Newman's eye. And so I was kicked to the front of the class. And if I wasn't there, and if I wasn't listening, and if I wasn't being nosy, I wouldn't have got involved. We ended up winning 3 awards, came second in the whole country, and I can't remember what the 2 other awards were. It was a seriously huge deal.
Yeah, big deal.
It was this was the Aer Lingus Young Science Exhibition. You had some like 10,000 school kids at the RDS, which is the big exhibition hall in Donnybrook in Dublin, from all over the country. It was huge. This is the day before social media, right? But if it wasn't, that would have been all over LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
It was a huge deal. We won. I won 3 awards, and that was a very, very big deal. And that kind of kick-started my career, that I could do something with kind of technology interest that I had. Ended up applying to University of Manchester for a computer science degree. Got in, scraped through, joined a company over in Chorley called Computer Applications Limited, which was digitizing farming or agriculture. It was so boring.
So
honestly,
some thrilling project.
I hated it. It was actually the year off. My year off, I used a language called Progress 4GL. Nobody ever heard of it. I hadn't heard of it until I joined this company in the centre of Manchester for my year off, which was incredible. And I always recommend to kids these days, go into a sandwich year. I did in St Mary's Parsonage, a company called Anite Systems. And I used this 4th generation language at the time, which was a kind of pseudo database and low level coding language. And then I got this job after I graduated doing the same thing. And I left for 6 months because I was so bored. And I joined Hewlett Packard. So HP, and again,
massive
brand back then. And I did something, again, stuck my nose into something I wasn't yet asked. So usually when you join a consulting organization, which is where I was at HP Consulting, you're usually kind of training, for lack of a better term, for 3, 4, 5, 6 months. You kind of do different projects. On day 2, there was a meeting in the Manchester office in Cheadle at the time. And I was asked to join it, and there were people around the room, and they said, look, there's a new thing. This was January 29th, 2000, because I remember I started on January 28th, January 29th, 2000. There's this new thing called WAP, Wireless Access Protocol, just been announced. Who wants to have a go? I stuck my hand up, right? I said, I'll have a go. No idea what it was. And then that was me getting involved in wireless and mobile data. I mean, back in those days, you had a Nokia, I think it was the A220. I think it was it kind of flapped forward. It had a banana phone. You had about 6 of them because it kept breaking. That was the first device that had data on the device using this WAP protocol. I did some development for that. And it was quite a leveler because it was one of those. That was the very first move of data into mobile devices or across mobile networks. And it was such an incredible leveler because people all over the world at the highest levels of industry wanted to do something with this brand new thing called mobile. It was cool, it was sexy, it was different. And by virtue of the fact that I was doing this, was a bit of a cheeky bugger, I could make a phone call to people many, many levels above me. And you can imagine a company like HP they were. To say what I was doing and getting involved. And because I just was cheeky, but I still am, I did that. And that you kind of moved really, really quickly. So I progressed really, really, really quickly in terms of the hierarchy of HP. I remember we acquired Compaq back in the day. And it was interesting because when you're 2 big public companies and you're going for acquisition, it has to go through regulatory approval. And there is a danger that is not, and because they're competitors, you create what's called a white room, where there are people on the Hewlett Packard side, the business, who are nominated to go into that white room, and people on the Compaq side who are nominated to be part of that white room. And you sign a new contract which says if this fails to get regulatory approval, or in HP's case, there are also some activist investors who are against the acquisition. If this failed for whatever reason to go forward, and it's going to take 9, 10, 12 months to get done, you would have to leave both businesses. that because you couldn't be in position and you got paid off nicely. That was the case. Anyway, I wasn't in the white room, but in that white room, were creating this global mobile organization. And once eventually the acquisition passed, and sort of 2 weeks later they announced this mobile thing, saw the guy's name on the internal announcement, called him up on the internal phone system. He was over in Boston, a guy called Bob Simmons, tremendous fellow. And he said, well, why don't you come and have a chat? So I said, well, what does that look like? He said, well, fly out to see me on Monday and fly back to see me on Tuesday. Fly back out Tuesday morning. So I arrived in Boston. This is very exciting, right? This was still a young kid. I flew out to Boston, arrived sort of 2:00 Monday afternoon, met a guy from Bob's team, a guy who was still a very close friend of mine today called Sridhar Salur. And Sri met me, brought me to this interview with Bob. We played table tennis, got the job, joined the team of 18 people, of which besides Sri, who could join our hair club, Eddie, great guy. There was an ex-NASA astronaut, which was cool. I'm a space geek.
Yeah, that's cool.
He had a very cool all-American name, Lamar Ledbetter, ex-NASA, a tremendous fellow, because the Compact guys were kind of from Houston, because that's where the headquarters of Compact was, so that's where he came from. It's a great team, and that kind of went from there. So I was there 7 years.
Did you move there, or are you still working?
No, they'll still work from here. And traveled all over the world. Did some work in Singapore, did some work in Japan, US, a lot of work in the US. A lot of work, actually was based for some time out of Grenoble near Lyon, and spent a lot of time out there as well. Before the days of sat-navs, I used to get lost on the drive from Lyon Airport into Grenoble. It was a 10-minute drive from my hotel to the office, but I'd get lost for like 2 hours, which now I know Grenoble. Not now, but then I knew the back of my hand because it was prior to the days of sat-nav. So that was a great experience, and laterally I ended up running a joint venture with Nokia here in Europe, HP Nokia, called Visual Radio, and I ran it here in Europe. And then I left that business for my first startup, which was a Jewish music startup, the Jewish equivalent of iTunes, called JTunes, believe it or not.
Right.
And we were very early. I mean,
and was that something you started, or did you?
Yeah. No, I started it,
right.
because the premise was, in any kind of niche, it's not like those of you who walk into HMV, or any other kind of retail store to pick up the latest CD. You would get that type of niche music from your local Jewish bookstore, and they would only have the 2 or 3 CDs that were current.
Yeah.
Any back catalogs, they just wouldn't have it to order. You just wouldn't be able to get it. So I figured, and iTunes had just come out. So I teamed up with a Russian or Ukrainian, I can't remember. No, they were Russian at the time. No, Ukrainian, I can't remember. Dev company, and they basically built me the equivalent of, and this is so painful back then because I had to create the entire CMS, the content management system. They had to create for me the on-device. You couldn't even build the apps, right? Because it wasn't. So it was just so. It was so painful. Yeah, basically, it was just a very complex thing. Anyway, they built that. The best success we had, the most money we made, actually, because we were very early in retrospect, was when Apple sent us a cease and desist letter, because we were JTunes, they were iTunes. And they thought we'd bend over straight away. But I had happened to meet at an event not long ago a lawyer, music industry lawyer, I can't remember the name, I think it was from Olswang, who I'm not sure now, but at the time were one of the major law firms. So I contacted him, and we sent a letter back from Olswang, right, to Apple's lawyers, who probably made think, okay, at least lawyered up, right? These Olswang are serious people, right? And we argued, look, we can't lose. If you win, then we get all the press. If you lose and we win, we are opening the floodgates. You're in serious trouble, Apple. So anyway, they settled with us, which was very nice. So that was the biggest check we ever got
to close.
And basically to rebrand.
Right.
But it basically paid for literally all the legal fees, and I think 13 quid extra. There was no money, right? But we closed, right? I'd fallen out with the founder, with the co-founder who I had approached. It's my idea, my concept. I approached him, he put money in. We had fallen out at one point. And anyway, it was too early. So it was not a good business, I found out. So we got out of that, and then I went to work for a traffic information business in South Manchester. I ended up running European biz dev, ended up winning a very big contract after working on it for 14 months with BMW. We beat out two exceptionally large businesses that don't exist at the time, called Navtech, which was acquired by Nokia, and Teleatlas, which was acquired by TomTom, and then an American company based out of Seattle called Inrix. So there are four of us bidding for this pan-European traffic business, and we beat them all. We won BMW. Inrix then acquired us. We used to joke that he did it because they're based in Seattle, and the weather is exactly the same in Seattle as in Manchester. I stayed there for about 6 months, then I got headhunted by Vodafone to join their to basically run their global automotive practice. So this was, I obviously had done very, very well in a very large business previously at HP. I'd been there for 7 years. I'd gone up the ranks. And very quickly at Vodafone, it became apparent that I was just too old for that nonsense. Like the political backfight. It just...
Because how old were you at this point?
I had I had all four of my kids by then. So 35, I think. Yeah. Something like that. So whereas I had flourished in a very large business previously at Vodafone, I didn't. Lots of backstabbing, fighting, political nonsense. And I remember the moment when I decided enough was enough, when I ran a team, I think, of 6 people at Vodafone at the time. And we were going through the annual peer reviews. And this is the first time I was introduced to this infamous bell curve, which was you had to rate your people along this bell curve. And, you typically had a very small number of your people would be at the excellent end of the bell curve, and most would be at the bell end. Can I say bell end?
Yeah, you can. You've said it.
at the bell middle bit.
Most people
right?
are, yeah.
Yeah, most people are bell end. And then at the far end, you'd have also a few. So most people would be clustered around the average.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, interesting. But then we end up horse trading, like as a management level. You'd end up horse trading with a fellow manager. Look, I'll agree to support that person being on the excellent end. And I thought to myself, that's not how you reward people. No. Yeah, that's not how you reward people. And between that and we went to this kind of annual sales, which it was beautiful. It was like a 3-day event in Budapest. It was great. I really enjoyed myself. But I just remember like the sales leader getting onto the stage and doing like a Steve Ballmer type dance, and I was like. And I remember looking
at time to go.
I was looking around me, and everyone was like really into it. And I was like, "What have I stepped into? I mean, what is going on here?" Anyway, so I then got a phone call not long afterwards by a partner of Vodafone that I was working with, a brilliant Israeli fellow, really, really great guy, who said, and I'd been working with him. He was one of my kind of partners in the program of work I was delivering. He was like, "Have you ever thought of leaving Vodafone?" I said, "Well, funny you should say that, Samuel, but yes." Anyway, ended up leaving. I left Vodafone, worked for those guys for a period of time, and at this point, I'd really started to work on what became my business. And where it came from was I was on a business trip once. Those days, I was often. It's quite a bit ironic that at the time that I was working for other people or then myself when my kids were young and it was not easy to travel, particularly for my wife, I was traveling all the time. Now that my kids are, my youngest is 15, practically 15, I'm hardly traveling.
Yeah, you could be traveling.
So I could be traveling, right? I'm glad I'm not, but I could be. Anyway, so I came out from a business trip once, and my wife said, can we redecorate our lounge? I was like, yeah, sure. And she said, great, because I've just been to B&Q and I've ripped off this square of wallpaper, and what do you think? And she held up and said, what do you think is wallpaper? And I was like, my brain could not imagine what this square wall would look like in our wall. And I said that, and she said, great, because that's for the 3 walls, and we've got a feature wall. I don't know what that was at the time. This is a different thing. What do you think? I was like, I had no idea.
Maybe.
Right, yeah, exactly, right. Now, what I should have done, and what would have saved a lot of aggro and money, is said, Dol, here's my credit card, and, knock yourself out. But that's not me. I went up and started researching, figuring there must be some app somewhere that allows you to take a picture of your room and put your wallpaper into the room.
Which now, right, would be dead easy to do.
Well, it's actually not. It's not. It's still hard, but there are... Anyway. Okay. So, it was Dulux, and it was a bit pants, to say the least. Yeah. And it was wallpaper. It was paint, but the same idea. But it was pants. This was like the first iPad days and App Store and stuff. So it was a bit pants. But anyway, so that was my business, right? It was called DigitalBridge, bridging the imagination gap. I approached a couple of computer vision PhDs at Manchester University. They joined me in the early stages of this business, and the concept there was to take a picture of your walls, floors, take a picture of the room, identify the shape, the geometry of the room, the walls, floors, ceiling, the lighting, and allow you to put wallpaper, paint, carpet, 3D furniture into a 2D picture. And it was amazing. It was, we cracked this technology and it just worked brilliantly. It really, really did. And everybody we spoke to and met with and engaged with just fell off the chairs how good this was. And the common refrain we got was, oh, if only I had this 2 months ago, 3 months ago when I was redecorating, it would have been amazing. And then we saw a very interesting lesson, is that's not good enough. For people to say that is amazing does not mean they're parting with money.
Correct.
And the lesson that I now can look back and say that was because we were delivering a vitamin pill. It was a sexy vitamin pill. It was a cool vitamin pill. It was a vitamin pill that everyone could resonate with and identify with and want, but it was no painkiller. Mm-hmm. We then pivoted. I remember I went to an offsite in Marbella for 3 days with GP Bullhound. They very kindly invited me to join their offsite. And I remember thinking, oh, this is nuts. I was and am a hardcore. I work really, really hard. Always have, a bit of a workaholic. But I always was. And I was like, I am not sitting on a beach club for 2-3 days in Marbella. That's just mental. What on earth am I doing there? Somebody gave me some very good advice. Says, no, you need to think of this as very important to the future of this business because you're with other entrepreneurs and investors. Anyway, I went. Very uncomfortable because it's just not me. Anyway, having the time and space away from the office gave me the most incredible clarity. I remember sat watching a European guy, the head of a company founder of a company called Delivery Hero, I think they were, which is basically Deliveroo, in effect, in Europe. And he stood there talking about his journey of building a 600 million euro business. And I literally sat there thinking, if he can, why can't I? And I went out and I went for a walk on the beach. And again, it was just time and space. And we've been building a bathroom and kitchen visualizer as a kind of way to start pivot the business. And it's starting to we could see traction starting to come through the door on this.
And for you, for traction, was that not direct to consumer, presumably?
No, it was to a retailer. It was to a retailer. So it was validation. Mm-hmm. And actually came to, I approached the Kingfisher Group, who own B&Q, with our kind of wallpaper visualizer, an obvious one, right? You would have thought. And they said, I remember the day, again, we were working with them for 6 months. They absolutely love what we're doing. And the chap there said, now a very good friend of mine, a guy called Andy Rudd, said, this is brilliant. Do you think you could build a bathroom or kitchen visualizer? I remember my heart just sinking, thinking, oh my goodness, the business has just gone. Yeah, I spent 6 months of this.
About stage one.
And I was like, oh my goodness. And we didn't. That was not. So I remember my CTO at the time says to me, privately, said, we can't do this. I said, look, let's project manage other people's tool sets into this business. And then we'll own the relationship. And that was, I was on the verge of saying no. Literally, I remember it to this day. I almost said, I'm sorry, that's not me. The words were on the tip of my tongue, but I didn't. I said, yes, we can do this for you. And it was the best decision I ever made because we were there on the inside of Kingfisher and we ended up co-creating a bathroom visualization tool for consumers. This never existed. It was always you go into IKEA, you go into a B&Q and you sit with a professional and you build out that tool set. You build out that design. This was for people before they ever went into a store, into a shop. And so I was on the beach in Marbs and this was starting to be validated. But we were created because we had this idea. I had this idea of wallpaper and paint visualization tool. And everyone loved it, but nobody was buying it. And we even won the John Lewis Accelerator program, JLab. I think we were the third cohort, and we won that cohort. And we were voted by all the partners as the best startup. And emotionally, I was tied to that. And only on the beach did I call up my COO and say, we're dumping it. We're switching off all emphasis, all focus, all product development on the 2D wallpaper, paint, everything else. And we're pivoting purely to focus on bathroom and kitchen.
What was the big trigger for that?
It's time and space. I was literally stood on the beach looking out at the water. I'd spent a day or so listening to the people talk, meeting great people. And it was a moment of epiphany. And it came about simply because I was not in the office. I wasn't being pulled down. So I learned from there that time and space, changing your perspective, can have an incredible impact. And we did. So we pivoted out in working with Home Depot in the US, built that business, got range of angel investments, got VC investments, ended up leaving that business once we got to a certain point. And that's kind of where this kind of, where I am now has come from. And that's when, so I'd left that business and I was starting a new thing.
So did you get bought out of that business? That's still
going. Yeah, that's still going. I think it's safe to say I brought in the wrong investors. They were not the right investors for the business, and that's
a common tale, right?
It's a common tale, and it happens, right? And I think, as much as I'm a huge fan of what the British Business Bank does, I think in particular the first iteration of its desire to get money out to the technology sector or to early stage startups is they chose the wrong investors. Yeah. So they chose private equity businesses to come in at venture capital stage, which is just a wrong fit. And that's what happens. Fine.
Did you feel aggrieved about that? Or
yeah, very much so. I can't say too much because
fair enough. But yeah,
NDAs and all the rest.
Not a happy ending.
Not a happy ending for them.
Yeah.
I think I look where I am now, and I'm very happy where I am, right? But there's always
not all the time.
There's always a journey. I mean, look, it's a baby, right? And I think when you realise you have made the wrong decision, and I always say this to founders today. When I talk to founders today, I say, you've got to realise that when you are inviting an investor in, you are marrying that investor.
Yep.
This is a long-term relationship.
I think a lot of people
get it right.
Yeah, and they see it as a quick fix.
It really isn't. It really isn't.
The absolute opposite.
And I think, again, the first iteration of the fund, the British Business Bank, I think it just chose the wrong investors. Yep. Just the wrong mindset. Day one is right.
Not a good match.
Well, day one, where can we cut costs and make this business profitable? I suppose day one is like, we haven't found product market fit. I mean, it's just
bit away from that. Yeah.
I think private equity masquerading as venture capital is just the wrong thing, right? So anyway, I was then started off a new business. I was, this was back end of COVID, so I'd invented, this is crazy, I had invented a face mask that didn't steam up your glasses.
Okay,
right.
Yeah.
Right, so I'd found a designer, I'd sourced the material myself, we iterated through, I can't even tell you how many designs, so we eventually came up with the design that worked, the material that worked. It was actually an anti-ballistic and anti-stab proof material that sat underneath the stab proof vest. That was the main material in a certain design. So she designed it. I had it made in Burnley. It was Blackburn. I'm sorry.
Of all places.
Blackburn, yeah, right, in Blackburn.
I was expecting somewhere else.
No, Blackburn. And then I built the entire stack. So I built the Shopify, I built the marketing stack. I'd go and pick up, 500 of these at a time in 4 different colours from this place in Blackburn. We'd package it up from home. I'd be like, right, guys, nobody is going on the Xbox today until everyone does at least 10 orders. That means my wife, right? Yeah. Sorry, Doll, you're not on the Xbox now. So we're literally around the kitchen table, and the place was a mess because when you kind of stuff these into envelopes, a little bit of plastic in the back of the sealable envelope.
Sure.
The place was a mess, but it was quite cool, was because my number 3 child, who is wasn't so academic now he's brilliant. I mean, he's a super hard worker, and he settles down to his work, and he does, and he is actually really clever academically. I don't think he gives himself credit for it, like the rest of them are. He generally is, but he is certainly the most entrepreneurial of them. And he was at that kind of 12, 13-year-old age. We was literally watching that. So he is the kid who now, very proud of all my kids, of course I am. But he is the kid who buys trainers off Vinted, cleans them up and resells them. In fact, I remember once he said, can I use your Amazon account? I was like, okay.
Depends what
for. And he said, what for? He says, well, I'll tell you when it arrives. Anyway, so the stuff arrived. And this thing arrives. And I'm like looking at it. And on the front, the box of this thing, it's like a little planetarium, plug-in planetarium thing, was what I recognized at the time. It was a weed factory. On the box was, and I was like, dude.
Yeah, come on.
Entrepreneurial, what's going? He says, I'll show you when it's done. Anyway, Long story short, it was not a weed factory. He'd built an oxidizing chamber where you bought these trainers and you stuck it in and for 24 hours and it cleaned up the soil. It was just amazing. Anyway, so very proud of that. So anyway, so I built the Shopify, built the marketing. So I was building an email marketing business off the back of this because it was becoming really successful. I then, there was Enterprise City in Bonded Warehouse here in Manchester had an accelerator program. This application went out. It was their first cohort. I applied
under
this new business. Under the because it was over by then. So this was the email marketing business. And in fact, I think Eddie, I emailed you at the time. Somebody introduced me.
Possibly.
Yeah, you had a nappy or children's clothes.
Yeah,
somebody. So I went in. So I got a phone call.
So why email marketing after that, Alvin?
Yeah, because it was working really well,
right?
And I was using Klaviyo and I was creating these. I'm really obsessed about copy and words, and I was doing brilliantly with my email marketing, superb numbers. So I set up an agency to do it, and so I applied into that business, and I got a phone call back from a guy who knew me. He says, "Come on, you're a bit too." You know this stuff, but why don't you join as our first entrepreneur in residence? I said, okay, let's do that. So we did.
What did that entail?
So it was being in there and people just tapping me on the shoulder for advice around raising, because I'd been there, I'd been on the journey, I built a business, I'd scaled a business, I'd left a business, got investment. So people asked me, if I could help. And actually, I did meet a fella. I can't remember if it was Sadra Hussain. I can't remember who it was. Somebody. Or Joe from VA World, somebody introduced me to you on email, but that was back then. Anyway, and then I was spending a lot of time with early stage startups. One of them, in fact, got onto YC as a result of the work we were doing together, and I ran his raise later on. A phenomenal fellow called Sean Brown, also part of Manchester Angels. You've not yet met him, but you will. He's a CEO of a company called Versori, which is an AI integration business, a brilliant business. And I met a guy called Hugh Campbell, who I knew for a few years. He was one of the original three founders, managing partner of GP Bullhound, one of the world's best technology investment banks. So I met him at the cafe. I hadn't seen him for a bit. He said, "David, how are you? Hugh, how are you?" Just one of the world's just nice people, just genuinely authentic, nice, warm people. I previously pitched. He had an angel group called the Audley Angels, based on Audley Edge. I previously pitched down to my own old business. So we caught up. And I expressed my frustration that there were just these brilliant early stage businesses who were just struggling to get early stage investment over the line. And he said, well, let's do something about this. So long story short, we set up Manchester Angels, GP Bullhound and Bruntwood. Chris Osby from Bruntwood, kind of the two original supporters of that, sponsors of that. We took over one or two other angel investment networks. There were a number of networks around.
Unofficial ones.
They were drinking clubs.
Yeah.
Male-only drinking clubs for the most part. Not all of them. But we took them over, we professionalized it, and we've done 14 or 15 investments since. We've got 48 members of the network, you included, which is really exciting. And the caliber, I remember our first meeting, our first dinner together, we went around the room. And I remember thinking to myself, it's actually a crime that nobody knows how brilliant the talent we have and the exited talent we have in Manchester. People who have built and exited businesses, and we're just crap about telling that story. Because these people, someone had exited. One chap who was actually our first, I asked him to be our first chair, the Angel Group, a guy called Simon Wilkinson. I met him in the very early days of my HP days. He was the founder of a company called Magic 4, which built software, kind of one of the precursors of a gaming engine from memory that went into Nokia devices, but it was years before an app store. So it was really deep into the device. I remember visiting him at his office on the way back from Warrington, and so he came on as our chair. He'd done numerous exits by now. He's bought a number of businesses since. So we just had these loads of Tony Bolland, Charlie Schreiber, just these people who had built, scaled, and exited several times.
Yeah, phenomenal success.
But people as well.
I don't shout about it.
Because that's, don't know why, but we don't, right? And I remember looking at Hugh across the table, and our eyes met, and we both thought that Hugh knew all this, But we just kind of nodded at each other and went, whoa. And that's what we've catalyzed. And I think what you see with Manchester Angels is we've done 14 investments in the last couple of years, which is really good actually for that type of angel network. But actually the number of businesses that we've impacted, spent time with, helped, and not invested is at least 3 times. Yeah, we're all our guys are regularly having coffees, meeting people. And what's fascinating is you can have, as an angel, you'll see this the whole time, Eddie, right? Because you're here in this beautiful ministry of work. You'll have a coffee with somebody. You'll think nothing of it. You'll have said something which is to you is blindingly obvious. In fact, you probably won't even think or realize you said something. But you've literally changed the trajectory of another person's business and therefore their life because you have shared something that you know and found out the hard way, but now don't even think about and they don't know. And that's what you, as an angel, that's what you have. And it's incredible. And that's the impact that we have. So besides the investments that we have done across sectors, we've done everything from solar-powered heating mat to a number of SaaS businesses, a couple of AI businesses, with a couple of life sciences, bio, deep tech. We've just done a brand new insulation material that's 160 times cheaper, thinner, and lighter than existing materials with the same thermal properties. That was an interesting dinner. That was, the guy came up. There were 3 good reasons, each of which I was convinced would mean that they wouldn't get investment. He walked out with the deal done. I mean, it was just, it was amazing, right? It was just amazing. So it's a brilliant group to be a part of. The brain trust in that room is incredible. But it's the collaboration. Like everyone, I mean, you've seen it now, right? No one is competing at all. There just seems to be a chemistry that we've stumbled across with that group of people. They're just a brilliant group of people who will just as quickly help, get involved, roll up their sleeves, have a coffee, share advice, look over something with or without investing. And they're incredible people. And we just seem to have hit on something which I'm very proud of and no idea where it's come from. And Hugh and Hugh Campbell from GP Bullhound and Chris Oglesby and the rest of our partners here, HSBC Innovation, Northern Gritstone, have a lot of credit here for helping us convene these incredible group of people to the point that, somebody will say, I don't know this sector. So a business will present either virtually or on one of our dinners. I don't know this sector, but I trust you. Yeah. And if you're in, I'm in. And then they share that, right? So we have that with a number of, for example, bio and life sciences businesses or the advanced materials business, where 1 or 2 angels have put their hand up there. I'll do the due diligence because I know this space. They'll go all in. And some of the other angels will go, well, I don't know it, but I know you.
But if you're willing to.
Yeah. And then it goes back to a business in their wheelhouse, right? Sure. So it's kind of back and forth. So that's kind of main job number 1 is Manchester Angels. Something I'm very proud of, something I know we're having a really big impact. And in typical fashion, we don't shout out enough about it, but we're making some changes to that. The other thing I do is I spend my time helping founders all over the world raise money from investors all over the world. That's a business called Glen Luna Ventures. It is, it's a fundraising business. I work with 3 or 4 businesses at a time. I've probably raised in excess of 30 million quid for businesses all over the world, mainly focusing on European and Israeli businesses. The 2 in Copenhagen last year, for example. Rarely work with American businesses, US, although I get startups from the US asking me the whole time. I kind of ask, why do you need a guy from the UK to help you here in the US? And it's not really fair because it's a generalization, Chicago or Idaho or Tennessee is not the same as Silicon Valley, right?
Sure.
But so I tend to stick, to Europe, and I'm very lucky in a very great position where my deal flow is overflowing, so I have to pick and choose. I am very picky and very choosing, but I've worked with just the most brilliant businesses. Really, really.
What sort of services will you provide for those?
So I will work very closely in helping to create the investment material, helping the founder understand the world through an investor's eyes, what an investor's looking for. We do all the research, we do the reach out on behalf of the founder to this network of VCs and angels we've built up all over the world. We have also a full-time research team who help research new investors for those guys. And we'll basically run the entire fundraising campaign. We don't get on calls with the investor because we're really big believer that the founder investor, absolutely. Sure. And I have lots of faults in life. One of the faults I don't have is I do not have an ego, so I don't feel the need to stick myself out in front. So, but we will work with the founder, support the founder, act on the founder's behalf. A deal that closed recently, a brilliant deal. He's not announced yet, so I can't talk about it here. A phenomenal founder, who I played in my first paddle game last week, actually. Great guy. Anyway, so I introduced a regional investor, somebody I'd not yet worked with, and they really liked the business. Had a meeting, really liked the business, called me, really liked the business. The founder called me, really loved the investor. And then the very first thing this investor did was ask the founder whether I could cut my fee in half.
Cut your fee in half.
Cut my fee in half.
Right.
I only take a success fee. I don't take retainers. Which you would have thought they would have asked me. I introduced them. They would have come to me first. They still would have got a no way.
Yeah. Right? Strange to ask.
Right? Because I don't ask my mortgage company if they can cut my mortgage in half. I mean, life. Anyway, and they said, well, we strongly believe that all the money we invest into a business needs to go into the business. So I said, look, I'm happy to discuss cutting my fee in half, but they need to cut their fees in half. Mm-hmm. And you can imagine the answer that came back: no, we're not cutting our fees in half. Right? So it was a nonsense. And then, but the founder was really excited about working with them. So David, we'll work out way. Fine.
Just for context, because I think it'll be useful for people listening. So why, in that case, would that regional fund have fees?
Because they need to make money. Mm. What you've got to realize is, the venture game is a long game. Yeah, it can be 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years. And if you're playing power law dynamics, these guys don't. Regional funds don't, because they are private equity, and VC it's a range. You've got the extreme of one end of private equity, which is super risk averse, and it's all about taking cost out and profitability. And you got venture capital, which is super risk embracing and don't really care about profitability. They're the two extremes. Most businesses, most venture funds will of course fall along that range. But most of the regionals that are sport of the British Business Bank kind of fall on they're so worried about protecting their downside, they don't really worry about the upside. Anyway, but the founder and I agreed we'd sort out the fee thing. It wasn't a show. I did not want to let that get in the way. So the founder was really excited about working with this investor, and the chemistry was great. And he called me and said, just come off the phone. They've given me a verbal offer. I'm really excited. David, I can't thank you. I was so excited. I said, let's just wait till the term sheet hit. So the term sheet hit, and he called me and said, I'm so excited about this. I said, well, can we talk through what the term sheet is, right? So so in this term sheet, there were three things that I hated individually. First is what's called participating preferences. The second is tranching. And third is the amount of money they wanted to put in. Participating preferences, I loathe. When you hear these stories of, for example, the founders of FanDuel who sold the business for like 500 million and walked away with nothing.
Yeah, it's wild.
Or the Israeli company Waze, right? Israel's first $1 billion exit, and the guys got almost nothing. It's participating preferences were the reason. Participating preferences mean when we invest in your business, we will take first of all, let's say we put in $1 million and we have a 3 times participating preference in the business. So we take out, and you sell the business, we put in $1 million and you sell the business for 10. We take out 3 times the amount of money we put in, 3 million, which leaves 7 of 10. And then we participate alongside everybody else according to the cap table. So it's double dipping, right? Again, it's just pure downside protection. It's just predatory. I hate it. So I said to the investors, this is what this means.
But again, to the average founder, they won't understand.
No, well, they do if they listen to me, because I shout out the whole time, right? Do not take participating. There are non-participating preferences, liquidation preferences that can work under the right circumstance. I'm not over the moon, but they're okay. I see a world in which they can exist. But also, let me go to the next one. The next one's tranching. Tranching is right. We'll put in I think it was 500, but tranche 1 is 250. And several months later, if you hit milestones, we'll put in the second 250. Tranching very often is there to screw a founder. I've seen it in practice time and time and time and time again. Not every investor does, but lots of investors do, where the second 250, is it coming? Yeah, it's coming. Are we hitting our milestones? Hitting our milestones. Everything in perfect. And then when you are at the point where you are counting on that second 250, you have not gone back out to market because you've got a contract that promises. When it's too late to do anything else, the investor shifts the goalposts. Sorry, valuation is too high, or there's some other reason that it's there to screw you. It was always there to screw you, and you end up being screwed. So I don't like tranching. There are some investors, and I know one here in the region who are perfectly fine, and they will never do that. But it is a tool often used to screw you, not a good tool. Yeah. And then the third thing is, this company we're raising 1.5. And this investor will only put in 500 if the round is no bigger than 950. And the founder was kind of saying, I think I can do it with 950. I said, but can you? Right? You wanted 1.5 because you had a very specific plan for 1.5. So is the tail wagging the dog here? Because they have certain ownership requirements. In their thesis, they will only invest if they're taking 500 or 950. That type of thing. I said, don't let the tail wag the dog. I said to him, look, I'm the guy who is going to get paid quicker. And I'm going to get paid more. And I should be advising you to take this so that I can just, pay a bit more of the mortgage and have a bit of an income for a bit. And I said, I'm not. I'm telling you to run away. Not just because of the terms, but because this is the type of investor that they have turned out to be. And this will come out. Yeah. Right? You will not enjoy life being invested by and he is so happy, and I'm so happy he listened to me. And it's like, look, all I'm doing is giving you my advice. Walk away. Your decision, your call, your business, but I'm telling you, it is my advice to walk away. In the end, we did the deal with jointly by the UK and the US investor. So that was, which is a really nice deal. Great terms, great business, very, very happy. But that happens a lot. So, and I think unfortunately it is something about the regionals that they're playing a portfolio game. It's not power law because they're not risk embracing enough to do kind of power law dynamics. But that's the type of organization they are. So they're the things that my two main jobs. Then are Manchester Angels. I run that. Everything from finding new angels like yourself to organizing the dinners, creating those nice printed books, or making the tea, finding the deal, put them in front of the gang. Great organization, and then helping the founders across the world raise. And then I'm the investment mentor across the UK Space Agency Accelerator Program, across Baltic Ventures, which is a national program based out in Liverpool, doing amazing things, and Turing Innovation Catalyst, which is an AI accelerator here in Manchester. And then I run this kind of Raise Like a Pro is my online brand, where I can only help 3 or 4 companies at a time. I wish I could help more, but I can't. So that's my way of kind of scaling up by just giving this type of level of candid, direct, honest feedback that I guess I'm getting a bit of a reputation for in the nicest possible way, where I'm just really candid with what I think people should or shouldn't do.
That was David Levine, founder of Glen Luna Ventures and the driving force behind Manchester Angels. Thanks so much for listening to the show this week, and please do make sure to click the follow button on your podcast app so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to check out Ministry of Work, where you can also sign up for a free trial day. This episode was produced, recorded and edited right here at Ministry of Work, with a special thanks to our studio manager Dan Brown and, of course, to you for listening. I'm Eddie Whittingham, and this has been Greater Manchester's Greatest Minds.